They want us to follow a dress code at school? Nope, I'll wear whatever I want. A little background for context. I've never been a fan of dress codes just for the sake of having them. So when I got into a boarding school that didn't require uniforms, I was thrilled. Honestly, I don't even hate dress codes in principle. My problem is always with how people interpret them. For example, if the rules say socks should be black or blue, 99.9% of people will assume it means navy blue. I'm the kind of person who'll show up in sky blue socks just to prove a point, not to make trouble, but simply to share a sly grin with the handful of people who think, well, it does just say blue. It's my way of reminding the bureaucrats who wrote the rules that they aren't as airtight as they think. As my husband likes to say, I've always been a bit of a pain in the neck. I enjoy showing that either or isn't the only option. I've always dressed boldly, loved unusual combinations of fabrics and colors, and if someone had encouraged me to learn sewing back then, I probably would have become a fashion designer. But boarding school is hardly a place full of vibrant creativity. Despite being spirited, I was never a troublemaker. My mum used to describe me as a polite, well-behaved kid who could bend rules into a pretzel without ever technically breaking them. She had to word her rules very carefully whenever she left me home alone. But she also had to be cautious not to give me new ideas in the process. If someone presented a rule as unbreakable, I just had to test it. And if they were pushy or smug about it, I'd find the cleverest way possible to prove them wrong. My mum always believed critical thinking was the real key to success in life. She taught me that if you can analyze a problem and figure out a solution, you don't need to have all the answers memorized, you just need to know how to find them. Remember, this was a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't fault modern parents for having a different mindset. Still, I'd raise my own kids with the same philosophy, if I had them. She raised me to believe success comes to people who don't just answer Apple when someone asks what that round red thing on the table is. Instead, you pick it up, study its weight and texture, notice the sheen on its wax, memorize its smell, because you never know when someone will ask you to describe the underside of an apple when there isn't one around. And when you grow up thinking that way, turning school dress codes inside out becomes kind of fun. So here's the actual story. At my boarding school, we had 2 dress codes. The first was called the class dress code, and it basically meant we were expected to look like young professionals. Pretty standard stuff. Skirts, below fingertip length for girls, shirts and TIs for boys, and all the usual details. The second set was for downtime, called city dress. That was for when we hung out in the student lounge or went off campus. It was more relaxed, but still had enough restrictions to prevent the girls from wearing anything too revealing or the boys from dressing like slobs in ripped clothes. Now, I had these suede knee-high fringe boots. Actually, I had 2 pairs, one black and one brown. They were the warmest, most comfortable boots I'd ever owned, even before UGGS became a thing. My mum and I had fought over those boots for years, so it was a huge personal victory when she let me bring them to school. One day, a teacher pulled me aside and told me the faculty had been discussing my boots and decided they didn't fit the class dress code. But I read the rules, I argued. There's nothing in there about boots like these. I know, she admitted, but we've decided they don't fit the image we want, but the color matches. I know, the material's fine too. Suede is allowed, yes. The rules don't mention height. Riding boots are permitted, right? That's true. So why then? I demanded. I honestly can't tell if I felt more angry or hurt, probably both. This teacher was someone I respected, someone who had always been kind to me. And I immediately understood why they sent her to talk to me instead of someone else, because I wasn't the type to throw a tantrum or cause a scene. I was the type to plan my revenge quietly. All right then, I said calmly, and walked away. That night, I studied the dress code rules word for word, line by line. I read through every single sentence of that dress code over and over again. I even said the rules out loud, picked up every item of clothing listed, and examined it like I was some alien who had only this manual and a piece of fabric to figure out why humans wear these things. I had to admit, it was a strict code, but they made 2 big mistakes. First, nowhere did it say where each piece of clothing had to be worn. Second, there was no mention that you even had to look presentable. The rules only specified colors and lengths. Skirts below fingertip length, socks above the ankle, sleeves covering elbows, and so on. Shoes had to be in muted tones, black, brown, or other earthy shades like my fringe boots, but nowhere did. It'd say you couldn't show up in, say, elf shoes. Of course, elf shoes wouldn't exactly scream professional, but still. Loophole. I went to bed that night mad as hell, my head buzzing with mischievous ideas. I debated with myself for a long time whether I should even go through with it, but eventually I decided if I still felt the same way in the morning, I'd start phase 1. The next day, I woke up just as annoyed, and on my way to breakfast, I mentally made a list of the biggest clowns in my class. In the cafeteria, I found a couple of them and told them, you know, the handbook is very specific about how TIs must be knotted Windsor, single or double. And if it's a bow tie, it has to be tied in the classic way. But nowhere does it say TIs have to be worn on the neck. The rule just says they must be properly tied. I suggested they read it carefully that evening and decide for themselves what to do with that little loophole. The following day, TIs were everywhere. On wrists, wrapped around glasses, tied across foreheads, looped around ankles, knees, thighs, even wrapped around fists like someone was stopping a nosebleed. If you could tie a Windsor knot on some body part, one of the boys in our school had done it. I was ridiculously proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were irritated, of course, though plenty of students found it hilarious until math class. One boy came in without a visible tie. He was the one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher looked down at him sternly and said, "I know you all decided to play games with TIs today. I think we've been patient enough, but you do know the rules say you have to be wearing one." He grinned, looked her in the eye, and replied, "I am wearing one. You just can't see it." The room exploded with laughter. Maybe he really did tie it around his ankle under his pants, or around his elbow under the blazer, who knows. But to the rest of us, he instantly became the guy who wore his tie on his junk. By the end of the day, I was considered the legend who had found a loophole, and he was the legend who took it to, well, the most infamous possible place. The very next morning, the school email newsletter had an announcement. The rules had been updated. TIs must now be worn on the neck only. Fun times were officially over, but phase 2. Oh, that was the real challenge. I'd been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I had ever seen at the mall. They were silver with holographic rainbow, circles all over, had a 5 centimeters platform, a chunky 10 centimeters heel, and lace-up fronts that came just above the ankle. Utterly outrageous. I knew there was no way I could get away with wearing them to class, but for city dress? I wanted them so badly, after 9 years of uniforms, I was finally starting to enjoy fashion. I'd been saving money for months and would sneak into that store whenever I could, just to look at them. For a while, I tried to convince myself they were too expensive, but once they banned my favorite suede fringe boots, my desire for those wild rainbow boots only grew stronger. Eventually, I scraped together enough money. It felt like fate. That weekend, I practically skipped to the mall, grinning from ear to ear only to find they were sold out in my size. I nearly burst into tears, but then, right next to them, I saw the same design in black patent leather. Until that moment, I dismissed the black pair as boring, especially compared to the silver ones. But here's the thing, our dress code had an entire paragraph about patent leather shoes. They were allowed, but only if worn with pants. Why? Because of that absurd old belief that shiny shoes could reflect a girl's underwear if she wore a skirt.so my rainbow boots. Absolutely banned. But they're black patent leather sisters with silver accents? Perfectly legal. Silver detailing was allowed since shoelace eyelets could be made of metal. And the 5 centimeters platform and 10 centimeters heel? Also, fine. There wasn't even a height restriction for heels in the dress code. I guess the school assumed no high school girl would willingly spend an entire day in stilettos, and unlike the shiny rainbow boots, their black patent leather version looked less like party footwear and more like ankle boots I would wear. Funny thing is, I never would have even glanced at those black boots if it weren't for my newly discovered obsession with the dress code. The outfit started with these bright orange polyester pants, covered in tiny grey-green amorphous specks, something that vaguely resembled a microscopic giraffe print. The green was barely visible. From a distance, it just looked like some random texture over the orange. The clash between the two colours was so aggressive that the pattern literally seemed to vibrate, making you dizzy and even a little nauseous if you stared too long. By sheer luck, I'd also managed to grab an orange terry sweater in exactly the same shade. The result? From the waist up, I looked like a rejected Sesame Street character, while from the waist down, I resembled a disco-era misfit. Did I mention the pants were slightly flared? So on Monday, I walked into class looking like someone who'd been thrown off the set of Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had these heavy wooden heels that clomped so loudly they echoed through the entire building. Suddenly, I was towering a good 10 centimeters over everyone else, more noticeable in the hallways, and even rivaling some teachers in terms of sheer presence. I caught a few of them throwing sideways glances at my boots, and I started keeping mental notes on which staff members apparently had it out for my suede knee-highs. It was obvious who found my appearance ridiculous, but I didn't stop there. It turned into a personal mission to curate the most hideous outfits my imagination could come up with. I didn't care how I looked anymore, I just wanted to make sure every piece still technically complied with the dress code. Even the teachers admitted my boots met the written requirements. They just didn't like them. I'd put effort into following their rules, and suddenly it wasn't good enough simply because my choices weren't to their taste. So fine. If they didn't like my boots, I'd wear ugly boots every single day, forcing them to stare at outfits that nobody in their right mind would find appealing. And what could they do? Tell me daily that my clothes were wrong while failing. To explain how. By their own admission, nothing I wore actually broke the rules. And I wasn't about to start breaking them, that's not my style. Living in a dorm had its perks. Girls shared clothes freely, so as long as you were willing to lend your stuff too, you essentially had access to 30 wardrobes just in our block alone. My own clothes had been carefully coordinated, but once you started mixing them with other people's, the results became gloriously absurd. Like when my roommate's loud neon blouse, which she only ever wore with a black skirt, ended up paired with another girl's skirt in a clashing wild print. I wore it specifically because the colours screamed at each other. Still, not against the rules. Those scandalous slut boots. I only ever paired them with pants. I raided every thrift store, vintage shop, and second-hand place in town. And since our city had no shortage of hippies, the selection was fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with TIs that made me look so boyish that at a parent-teacher meeting, one of the teachers actually asked my mum if I was. Apparently, dressing badly meant you were automatically gay. I'd braid my bangs into a thin plait, clip a heavy earring to the end so it dangled, and then swing it back and forth over my desk or book, but only during the lessons of the teachers. I suspected of discriminating against my boots. Basically, I did everything I could to annoy them with my appearance. At that infamous parent-teacher conference, they asked my mum to talk to me about my clothes. She blinked and asked if I was breaking any rules. They explained the boot situation. My mum laughed and told them there was nothing they could do. If there's one thing her daughter hated, it was being punished for a rule she didn't know existed, or worse, one that had never even been written down. If you want to make a new rule right now to stop her, go ahead, Mum said. Bye. Tomorrow, she won't be doing this anymore. I promise you won't see those boots again. But the way she'll see it, you've taken away something she liked for no good reason. That's punishment, whether you call it that or not. And when she feels punished unfairly, she punishes back. Simple as that. My advice? Drop it and spend the summer rewriting your handbook. Otherwise, you'll burn through paper trying to keep up with all the loopholes she's going to find. My daughter lives for finding loopholes. Honestly, I regret giving her so many puzzle books when she was little. Hearing this, the teachers admitted the only real reason they were ignoring my new boots was this: when the teachers saw how I reacted to the suede boots ban. Some of them honestly seemed afraid to imagine what I might show up in next if they tried to outlaw the second pair as well. But being the well-behaved student that I actually was, I never wore those suede boots again. And after that, no one ever gave me grief about my outfits again. Well, except for one time when my skirt ended up way too short. That one wasn't even intentional. The following year, I didn't return to that school, but for completely unrelated reasons. So I never found out if they rewrote any of their rules. To this day though, I've kept those black boots. They're still tucked away somewhere. And every time I stumble across them at the bottom of a box, I can't help but smile. I even held onto a t-shirt from that era. It is, without exaggeration, the single ugliest piece of clothing I own, but I just can't throw it out. Every time I see it in my closet, I start laughing, remembering the whole saga. Somewhere, I've even got photos of me in that ridiculous fuzzy orange getup. If I ever dig them out, I'll definitely share them. Back then, I was having the time of my life, breaking their so-called dress code. And it felt amazing. So here's the takeaway. Whatever problems you're facing, try flipping them inside out. Look at them from a different angle, twist them around, play with them. You never know where the cracks might be hiding. And of course, this is also just another wonderful story about how amazing my mum was. She always had my back, though if I'm honest, I suspect she was also quietly angry that the teachers hated our boots. Because if the school rules had been clearly written, she could have been wearing them herself all along instead. Those awesome boots just sat gathering dust in my locker. I miss you, Mum. Edit. No, I didn't end up becoming a lawyer. Life just went in a different direction. These days, I work for myself, building a business in a field I'm genuinely passionate about. I enjoy almost every minute of it. I'm happy, and I'm grateful that I get to love what I do. One last note. This whole story took place in the mid-90s. I let my father and his new wife stay at my place because they were struggling financially, but within just a month, she was already trying to make me pay the monthly rent. My life has been difficult from the very beginning. My mother died giving birth to me, and my father raised me, but for some reason, he blamed me, an infant, for her death. Throughout my entire childhood, not a day went by without him reminding me, in harsh words, that I was the reason my mother was gone. He constantly repeated that my birth had stolen the most precious person from him, that he never wanted me, and that my very existence had cost him too much. According to him, I had to work hard to make up for it, otherwise my mother's death was meaningless. Hearing those words as a child was soul-crushing. I was too young to understand his grief, anger, and loss. I needed a mother too, but she wasn't there, and the one parent I had saw me only as a burden. The man who should have been my protector and source of comfort became the one who reminded me daily that I was unwanted, that my life itself was a curse. Growing up in that environment was unbearable. I carried constant guilt just for existing. There were moments I desperately wanted to tell him how much his words hurt me, how empty and broken they made me feel. But fear kept me silent, and the few times I tried, I was met only with more bitterness and rage. My childhood became defined by deep loneliness and isolation. While other kids had parents who comforted them, guided them, and gave them a sense of security, I felt like I was walking on thin ice every single day, just trying to avoid another explosion of anger. Despite everything, I tried to understand his pain. I knew losing my mum had shattered him and that he never recovered, but that didn't make his cruelty any easier to carry. I was just a child trying to find my place in a world that already felt cold and unwelcoming. And yet, deep down, I kept craving his approval, his love, his recognition. I always hoped that maybe one day I could make him proud. I remember the nervous excitement I felt whenever I brought home a report card with good grades. I would rush to him, hoping for a smile or a word of praise, anything that could make me feel worthy in his eyes. But every time was the same. He would glance at it briefly, grunt, and tell me it wasn't enough. He reminded me that there were hundreds of other kids who could get the same grades, so I wasn't special. Instead of encouragement, I was met with indifference and constant reminders that I could never measure up. It wasn't just about school. Whenever I wanted to do something outside of studying, play soccer, join an activity with friends, he immediately forbade it. He said the only thing I should focus on was studying so that I could leave his house as quickly as possible. Those words stuck, making it clear that he saw me as a burden, not as a son. My friends would tell me how their parents supported their hobbies, encouraged them to enjoy being kids. But I never had that. My father constantly reminded me I was just a guest in his house, and that if I didn't follow his rules, he'd throw me out. Even weekends, which should have been a time for rest or fun, were no different from school days. If I asked to go outside or spend time with friends, he'd start a lecture about how much money he spent on me and how I didn't deserve to waste time on friendship. Anything that brought me joy was dismissed as a waste in his eyes. One of the most painful memories was my 15th birthday. Most kids look forward to birthdays, planning parties and celebrating with friends. But for me, it was a day filled with dread. My father hated when I tried to celebrate. Still, that year, I hoped for something different. I just wanted to go see a movie and eat pizza with my friends. When I finally gathered the courage to ask him for a little money, he exploded. He shouted that I had no right to celebrate because my birthday was also the day my mother died. He made it clear that my birthday would always be the worst day of the year for him and that I should never even think of enjoying it. From then on, I never celebrated with friends. Over time, these repeated experiences convinced me that my father truly hated me and never wanted me in his life. The constant rejection and criticism left deep scars that still affect me today. Over time, I learned to keep my hopes and dreams to myself. I stopped expecting approval or support from my father because I knew it would only lead to more disappointment and pain. Instead, I focused on being strong for my own sake and poured all my energy into academics, determined to leave his house as soon as I could. Eventually, all that hard work, persistence, and determination paid off. I still remember the moment I opened the acceptance letter one of the top universities had offered me a full scholarship. It was a strange mixture of relief and pride. Finally, I was leaving that house behind. I was walking away from my father's, suffocating control and stepping into a new chapter where I could live on my own terms. Leaving felt like removing a heavy weight I had carried all my life. For the first time, I felt genuinely free. Those 4 years in college became some of the best of my life. They were years of growth, discovery, and joy. I finally had the chance to live like a normal person. My father could no longer dictate my every move, and although he occasionally tried to exert control from a distance, I didn't listen anymore. After years of pressure, I was ready to make my own choices and build the life I wanted. Even with all the freedom and happiness college gave me, I never forgot why I was there. I maintained excellent grades, determined to make the most of the opportunity I had fought so hard for. But I also found balance. I went to parties, joined clubs, met new people, picked up hobbies, and, for the first time, I allowed myself to. Simply Live.it was during this period that I met Sheila. Meeting her was one of the most unexpected and beautiful turns of my life. From the very beginning, there was something about her that drew me in. We were remarkably alike, ambitious, driven, and career-focused. Sheila understood me in a way no one else ever had. One of the things I loved most about her was how comfortable the silence between us felt. We could sit together for hours, each lost in our own thoughts, without needing to fill the space. With her, I never felt pressured to be someone I wasn't. Sheila was the first person who made me feel I no longer had to carry the weight of guilt I had been dragging with me for so many years. She saw the pain I had normalized, the hurt that had become so ingrained I no longer even recognized it as wrong. She reminded me how unfair it had been for my father to blame me for my mother's death and told me that no child should ever bear such a burden. It was Sheila who insisted I see a therapist, something I had never even considered. My father's words had cut so deeply into my mind that I didn't realize I could ever be free from them. Therapy changed my life. At first, it was incredibly difficult to face the trauma of my upbringing, to acknowledge the damage, and to start dismantling the toxic beliefs I had absorbed. But with time and effort, I began to see clearly. I understood how wrong my father's mindset had been, and I realized I deserved better. Slowly, I came to accept that I was not responsible for my mother's death. My father's anger and hatred were his own demons, not mine to carry. As I began to heal, something else surfaced: anger. Years of buried frustration finally came boiling to the surface. I had spent so much of my life trying to win his approval, trying to be the son he wanted, all while carrying the guilt he had forced onto me. But now I knew it was never my responsibility. His grief was his to face, not mine. That anger made it almost impossible to maintain a normal relationship with him. During college, we spoke rarely, and when we did, the conversations were short and strained. I had little patience left for his criticism or attempts to control me. Then, one day, it all came out. The words I had buried for years spilled out in an unplanned confrontation. I told him about the damage his words had caused, about the scars his constant blame had left on my mental health. I made it clear that I would no longer be his scapegoat, and that if he couldn't respect me, I was ready to cut him off for good. For the first time, he had no response. He didn't apologize, as I had secretly hoped, but he also didn't deny my words. And after that conversation, I noticed something shift in him. He became a little softer, a little less harsh in how he spoke. To me, It felt as if he was finally trying, maybe not to make things right, but at least to change. Still, even with that small shift, our relationship remained strained. Years of pain and resentment cannot be erased overnight. I appreciated the effort, but the damage was already carved deep. The damage my father had caused would have taken far more than words to repair, if repair was even possible at all. Over the years, even though our relationship remained strained, I no longer carried the same level of rage or guilt that once consumed me. Slowly, I came to accept that while I couldn't change the past, I could choose how much power it had over my future. Of course, Sheila's support played a huge role in this. I will always be deeply grateful to her for showing me that I am worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Not long ago, my father married his long-term girlfriend, Day. They had a small wedding, and despite everything between us, I decided to attend with Sheila. A part of me was genuinely happy for him, and I hoped marriage might change him for the better, but only a month later, he called me in desperation. He had made a series of poor financial choices and was barely scraping by. He admitted he hadn't paid rent in 6 months and was now facing eviction. He told me he couldn't confide in his new wife because it would cause a major conflict between them. The first thing he asked was if I could give him money for rent. My immediate response was no. Even though I could afford it, I wasn't willing to become his financial safety net, especially after everything in our history. I had worked far too hard to build my own life, and I wasn't about to set a precedent where he could come to me every time he messed up. Still, after talking it over with Sheila, I reconsidered. He was my father after all, and maybe he truly needed help. I called him back and offered a compromise. I wouldn't pay his rent, but I would let him and Day stay at my place temporarily. I had enough space, and they could use the guest room until they saved enough money to move out. I made it clear that this was temporary, and I expected him to actively work toward independence. He hesitated, but eventually agreed. 2 weeks later, they moved in. The first month was a period of adjustment for all of us. It had been years since we lived under the same roof, and we were now completely different people. I was no longer the teenager who silently endured his criticism. I was an adult with a life of my own. Unfortunately, his old habits soon resurfaced. He began making remarks about how I ran my household, criticizing small things about order, routines, and lifestyle as if nothing had changed. But I wasn't that same powerless kid anymore. This time, I defended my boundaries. Whenever he tried to control or criticize me, I firmly told him to stop. I reminded him that he had no right to dictate anything in my life, especially while living in my house. I wasn't rude, but I was clear and unwavering. Day didn't take it well. More than once, she told me I should show my father more respect, insisting he had sacrificed so much for me. I would just shake my head, knowing she had no idea what really happened during my childhood. She only knew the version of my father that he presented to her, not the one who had left me scarred for years. I chose not to argue or reveal the truth. It wasn't my place to drag her into the past. Still, I knew living together would be difficult. I tried to stay optimistic, hoping we would eventually find a way to coexist peacefully, but one evening, after an exhausting day at work, I came home to find my father lounging on the couch with Day, watching TV. The house was a mess, and the kitchen sink was piled high with dirty dishes. I asked him why he hadn't cleaned, since it was his turn to take care of chores. His response came in that same old tone that had haunted me for years, the one that always made me grit my teeth. "You're a grown man I raised all by myself after your mother died. You should be ashamed of asking me to do something like this. Wash your own damn dishes." The fury that rose in me was instant. I snapped back without hesitation. "You know what's actually shameful? The fact that you're sitting on my couch, in my house, eating my food, watching my TV, and still trying to boss me around when you begged me to let you stay here for free. You and your wife haven't lifted a finger since you moved in. Then maybe you should pack your things and leave right now if washing dishes is beneath you." My father just stared at me, stunned by my outburst. The room went silent, so heavy I thought he might actually stand up and walk out, but I knew he had nowhere to go. Without another word, I turned and left the kitchen, slamming the door behind me while my chest pounded with a mix of anger and disappointment. The next morning, when I came downstairs, only Day was there. My father must have left early for work. I was ready to grab my coffee and leave when she stopped me and asked if we could talk. With a serious look, she began explaining how deeply hurt my father had been by what I said the night before. Then she told me something that nearly made me choke. According to her, my father had claimed he helped me buy this house using some of his savings. For a second, I almost laughed out loud. Every dollar for this home had come from my own savings, my own hard work. My father hadn't given me a cent. I asked Day to clarify, and she repeated what he had told her, that I owed him gratitude because he supposedly made financial sacrifices for me. She even suggested it would only be fair if I repaid him by covering the cost of their stay here, since this was technically his house too. I couldn't hold it in, I burst into laughter. The absurdity of it was too much. When I finally managed to calm down, I told her the truth. This house was entirely mine. My father had never contributed a single dollar. The look on her face was priceless: shock, embarrassment, and anger all at once. She pressed me, asking if it was really true that he had never helped me, and I confirmed it. I explained that he had been struggling to pay his own rent for years, so how could he possibly have supported me in buying property? After that conversation, she went quiet. A few hours later, she packed her belongings and walked out. I didn't stop her, it wasn't my responsibility. That evening, when my father returned and saw her things gone, he called her in a panic. When he learned I had told her the truth, he turned on me, accusing me of ruining his marriage. He claimed I should have kept quiet and let her believe the lie, because now he felt worthless compared to me. According to him, I was at fault for exposing him, for making her feel deceived. His words infuriated me. I reminded him that I had opened my home to them out of generosity, and instead of gratitude, I was being blamed for problems he had created. He acted as though I owed him, when in reality, he had been taking advantage of me. It felt like being a child again, when he always managed to twist everything so that I ended up the villain. This time, though, I refused to play that role. I told him plainly that I would not lie for him, not today, not to anyone. His endless manipulation and guilt-tripping had drained me, and I had reached my breaking point. I told him he had to leave my house the next morning. He begged me not to, said he had nowhere else to go, but I held firm. It was one of the hardest choices I've ever made, but I knew I had to protect my peace and sanity. Since then, he's been calling me constantly, claiming I destroyed his life and his marriage because Day won't speak to him. He blames me for everything, telling me a good son would never throw his parents out. Update 1, I'm grateful for those who reminded me just how much trauma my father put me through over the years. Many people have suggested I reach out to Day and tell her the truth about my childhood, since she clearly never knew the full story. Update 2, it took about a week, but I finally managed to have a real conversation with Day. As it turned out, she had no idea what my childhood had really been like. I opened up to her about the guilt and emotional scars I carried and how much they had shaped me. She was shocked. Apparently, my father had painted a completely different picture of himself, presenting as the noble single dad who had sacrificed everything for his child. I told her the truth, how he blamed me for my mother's death, how I grew up under constant criticism, and how hard I had worked in college to finally stand on my own feet. I explained that landing a well-paying job allowed me to save and eventually buy this house. I also made it clear why I hated the way he tried to dictate things under my roof, because as a kid, I never had the freedom to be myself in his home. Day listened quietly and admitted she finally understood where I was coming from. Then she revealed something I hadn't known. My father had actually lost all his money to gambling. He had been too ashamed to admit it, so he made her believe another story. In fact, when he first suggested moving in with me, she had resisted the idea. To make her feel less uneasy, he lied and told her he had financially helped me purchase my house. That way, she would see the place as partly his, not just mine. Once she realized his claim was a total fabrication, another manipulation to get what he wanted, she was devastated. Day confessed she felt embarrassed for having once demanded that I repay him by covering their rent. I reassured her it wasn't her fault. My father had twisted the truth, and the responsibility was entirely on him. Before leaving, she told me she planned to step back from the relationship with him, at least for a while, to process everything. Update 3. Hi everyone. It's been 3 months since my last update. After asking my father to move out, I cut all contact with him completely. It wasn't easy, but it was absolutely necessary for my mental and emotional well-being. The last time we spoke, he once again tried to pin everything on me, but instead of engaging, I blocked him. Since then, I can honestly say I feel lighter, freer, and finally at peace. My home feels like mine again. More importantly, I've been focusing on myself, on my goals, and on building the future I want. Through all of this, my girlfriend has been my rock, comforting me, encouraging me, and standing by me at every step. Her support has meant the world to me, and I couldn't be more grateful. Now, for the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm truly living life on my own terms. I'm 22, and I just found out I'm dying. My 3-year-old daughter will be left behind. Last week, the doctor told me I have terminal lung cancer. Turns out, picking up cigarettes at 15 and eventually working my way up to 3 packs a day was a terrible decision. Stupid, I know, but I thought I had more time. Now I'm stage 4, with only a few months left. Please don't pity me. Honestly, the only truly good thing I've ever done is bringing my daughter into this world. So my loss isn't much of a tragedy for anyone but her. I don't have family to lean on. I grew up in the foster care system. My daughter's father is serving time for serious crimes, and even if he got out, he's legally barred from being in her life. My little girl is only 3. We live in a rough neighborhood, and when I work, I leave her with my elderly neighbor, who can't even remember her name half the time. I don't want her growing up the way I did in the same broken system, feeling abandoned. Yes, I know my choices played a huge part in this mess. But if I'd had a family or anyone to watch out for me, maybe things would have been different. All I want now is to give my daughter a chance at a better life than mine. And I think I know who could give her that. One of my closest friends, my co-worker, is an amazing woman. At work, I'm the expendable one, the person who'd be let go first if cuts happen. She, on the other hand, is one of the top employees, has a stable income, a kind husband, and a child of her own. I want to ask her if she would consider adopting my daughter when I'm gone. But I also know it's a huge thing to ask. She and her family are black, while my daughter and I have very fair blue eyes, pale skin. I can't help but worry about the challenges they might face raising a white child. Still, the thought of my daughter ending up in the foster system again breaks me. Right now, all I could leave my child with is $1,000 and my mother's necklace. That's it. And I can't decide what's right. Should I work as hard as I can until the end to save her a little money, or should I swallow my fear and ask my friend to raise her? Either way, I feel like I've failed as a mother, and that regret is something I'll carry to my grave. Update. I reached out to my friend and we met at a little bakery. I finally told her about my diagnosis, something I hadn't shared at work, and asked if she would consider adopting my daughter. She was shocked and tried to comfort me about the cancer. She didn't give me an answer right away. She explained that she had always dreamed of having a daughter, but complications during her second pregnancy made that impossible. So she wants to seriously think about it, but she needed to talk it over with her husband first. I understood. It's a huge change for any family. After we finished eating, she hugged me and said she'd miss me. I couldn't hold it in, I cried right there. Since then, I've started something new, writing letters and recording videos for my daughter. Someone suggested it, and I think it's brilliant. I created an email account for her and have been making short videos for her future birthdays, first crush, graduation, first job. Most of them are bittersweet messages reminding her not to repeat my mistakes. A few days later, my friend texted me. After a long discussion with her husband, they're both seriously considering adoption. They have a rule for big life decisions. Agree together, then wait a little while before finalizing. If they still feel the same after some time, they move forward. She told me it's not a definite yes yet, because there are still things they need to sort out. But she made it clear they really like the idea, even though they don't know. My daughter, well, just yet. Her husband and 6-year-old son had never even met my daughter before, and my friend only knew about her through the stories I shared. So they came up with a plan. For the next month, I'll be waking up 2 hours earlier than usual to drop my little girl off at their house. My friend's husband works from home, so he'll watch her during the day, giving her time to get comfortable with him and their son. Later, I'll head to work with my friend. This way, her family can slowly get to know my daughter, and she can get to know them. She also told me she wants us to spend Christmas together. Yesterday was the first day I dropped my daughter off there. When I came to pick her up, she looked happier than I'd seen her in a long time. My friend's husband admitted it wasn't perfect. She was shy, scared, and didn't want to play with their son. But he said that's normal for a first day and that things would probably improve. Today I brought her again, and while she mostly just watched their son play, it already went better than yesterday. That's where we are now. I'm terrified this might all be for nothing, but at least my daughter is already starting to feel more comfortable in their home. Even if they ultimately say no, at least she'll have these good memories, something warmer than what I was able to give her alone. Comments from strangers online, sending you endless love. I hope you can find peace, knowing you're doing everything possible to give your little girl a safe, loving future. Even if this doesn't work out, you've already given her so much by trying. One person gave me important advice about the email account I set up for my daughter. They warned me to make backups of all the videos and letters on a USB, CD, or cloud storage because accounts can be shut down after inactivity. That shook me. The thought of my daughter losing everything I left behind terrifies me. I promised myself I'll back up everything and maybe even tell my friend about it later, in case she needs to help keep it alive. Another comment really touched me. I'm just a stranger on the internet, but as a mother, I want you to know I'm proud of you. Everything you have left is poured into your daughter, and that's exactly what makes you an incredible mum. Someone suggested something beautiful, writing down recipes, little family traditions, and details only I know, like my favorite color, the music I love, the places that make me happy. Not typed, but handwritten, so my daughter has something real she can hold onto when she misses me. The idea made me cry in a good way. I've decided I'll write down her favorite meals, like my egg salad sandwiches she loves so much, and keep a journal of small, happy moments for her. I also thought about leaving her a letter for her 13th birthday. The only thing I have from my own mother is a necklace with swirls and thorns carved into the metal and a clear stone in the center. It's the only piece of her I ever had. And one day, it will belong to my daughter. I want her to know its story, that it was her grandmother's, then mine, and now hers. Second update. I'm sorry it took me so long to come back. A lot has happened, and this will probably be my last post. Right after Christmas, I got very sick. My chest felt like someone was pounding it with a hammer, and then I started coughing up blood. My best friend panicked, thinking I'd caught something contagious since doctors had warned me even a simple illness could kill me now. We rushed to the hospital. Thankfully, I didn't catch anything new, it was just my cancer worsening. At that point, I was still working, so at least insurance covered most of the bills. Then, something awful happened. The very same week, my job called me in. Remember how I said I'd be the first one cut if anything happened? Well, they told me they couldn't keep me employed anymore because I'm dying. They said it wasn't fair to my coworkers since I was less productive and they had to pick up the slack. I guess I knew it was true. I had been struggling, missing days, leaning on others. But still, I didn't expect them to actually complain to management about me. .id crushed me. I really thought I could hold on until the end of the month to at least pay rent one more time. Instead, I walked out of there jobless, humiliated, and reminded once again how much of a burden I've become. I could barely cover rent, utilities, food, transport, and medical bills. That's when my best friend and her husband stepped in. They agreed to adopt my little girl. She shared some of their plans with me, but I told her maybe it would be best if my daughter moved in with them right away. When she asked me why, I confessed I had been fired, and with my tiny savings, I couldn't possibly take care of the two of us. That's when she surprised me. She said both my daughter and I could move in with her family. They have more than enough space in their house with several guest rooms, and I could choose whichever one I wanted. At first, I tried to refuse. After all, they were already doing so much for us. But she insisted. She said having me there in my final months would actually help them too. I could show them how to make my daughter's favorite meals, help decorate her new room, and guide her through the transition. She told me I would never be a burden. Right now, we're working through the adoption papers, so everything is in place when I'm gone. And honestly, being here has helped my daughter settle into her new home so much faster. Her family is also very secure. They even have their own family lawyer who's been handling all the legal steps with me when I'm strong enough to sit through meetings. I want to share something beautiful. This Christmas, spent with my friends. Family was the best Christmas of my life, and my daughter's too. They had 5 Christmas trees scattered throughout the house, each one decorated differently. And thanks to my friend, I was able to give my daughter a truly special gift, a stuffed bunny from Build-A-Bear with a recorded message inside. I told her how much I love her and that I'll always be trying to protect her. Now she has something Of me, she can hold forever. My friend also knows about the letters. I'm nearly finished with them, just a few left to write. I gave her all the passwords to both my email and this account, so when I'm gone, she can delete them. I'm sorry, but I don't want people writing to me after my death. Since my last update, messages have exploded. Apparently my story ended up on TikTok, and now strangers from everywhere are reaching out. It's strange. I've never had this kind of attention in my life, and now, as I'm dying, people finally want to talk to me. Many have written to say that if my friend had refused, they would have gladly adopted my daughter themselves. I can't thank you enough, but luckily my friend said yes. If you still feel that urge, please reach out to your local foster system. There are children there right now, suffering the way I once did, waiting for someone to give them a life I never had. Others have offered to send money. Please don't. I've worked for everything I had my whole life, and I can't bring myself to accept money from strangers just because I'm dying. I also want to address the questions about race. Some people asked why it mattered to me that my friend's family is a different race from me and my daughter. My fears never came from thinking we were better because we're white. Quite the opposite. I've seen too much in the system, and I spoke with kids who were placed with families of a different race. Some of them told me about terrible experiences not because of their parents, but because of the world outside. People insulted them. One child told me an old woman screamed at him in a restaurant, and when his parents tried to defend him, it turned into a fight. So yes, I was afraid my daughter might face the same hatred. But I can't let my fear of cruel strangers stop her from having a loving home.so. This will likely be my final post. I don't want to waste the little time I have left. I've even thought about painting again. I used to draw in high school, but gave it up. There's a line I remember from a classic novel we read in literature class about a world where books were banned. I can't recall it exactly, but the main character said something like, "You haven't lived in vain if you leave something behind." That thought has stayed with me all these years. Maybe I'll leave behind a painting, something my friend can hang, or even just store away in an attic. If I leave even one small piece of myself behind, then maybe my life wasn't meaningless after all. For now, my only focus is helping my daughter feel at home in her new family. Thank you everyone for your kindness. And goodbye. Comments. What about your daughter's father or grandparents? I'm so sorry this is happening, but please think of family first. Author's reply, her father is in prison, and I hope he stays there a very long time. His crime was against children. Even if he's ever released, he'll never be allowed near her, and I don't want him near her anyway. My parents are gone. Final update, I must have written and deleted this post a dozen times. She asked me to write to you when she was gone. It has taken me until now to find the strength. Forgive me. We buried her 2 weeks ago. At her funeral were my colleagues, our family, and the friends she had managed to keep close throughout her life. When she first saw the prices of caskets and burial plots, she had a panic attack. We told her we would choose the simplest, cheapest options. We lied. She deserved better. Than that, she deserved a proper farewell and a place of rest worthy of her strength. Her name was Michelle. She entered the foster care system at the age of 3 after losing her mother in a car accident. She never knew her father. At 16, the man who was supposed to protect her instead pulled her out of school. By 18, she discovered she was pregnant with his child. Not long after, police found terrible images and videos of children on his computer, and he was arrested. From then on, Michelle fought to survive working, providing for herself and for her daughter, never asking for more than she thought she was allowed to have. She joined our company just after her 19th birthday. Only a few months ago, I learned she had lied on her sum to get the job. When I asked her why, she smiled and said, "What difference does it make? They taught me everything anyway." That was Michelle in a single sentence, unafraid to take a risk if it meant moving forward. It breaks me to read the letters she left behind for her daughter. She thought so little of herself, but she gave everything she had to the people she loved. She carried herself with quiet confidence, with her head held high, even when the world had done nothing but try to break her. To us, she always seemed fearless. Even in her last months, when fear and grief caught up with her, I believed she had earned the right to every single moment of weakness. Michelle had this way of befriending people others ignored. Before she moved in with us, she knew the homeless. Men who stayed near her apartment. One of them, Ted, lived by the gas station close to the bus stop. Just before her health collapsed, she asked me to take her there. I thought she wanted one last look at the neighborhood she used to call home. But she went to the corner store, bought a sandwich, and quietly handed it to Ted. He came to her funeral. I don't want to dwell on her last weeks. They were spent in the hospital, and she was so fragile, so unlike the Michelle we all knew. We visited as often as we could, but it was hard on our children to see her that way. It was hard on all of us. Still, we couldn't leave her alone. On our last visit, I knew. I felt it. That night, she passed in her sleep.at the service. The flowers were gladiolus and poppies. We chose gladiolus because of what they symbolize: strength, integrity. Michelle had asked for poppies. She always called our little girl her Poppy, her small red flower. We even painted little poppies on the walls of her room. Now, every night, she still clutches the stuffed bunny Michelle made for her, the one with her recorded voice inside. Michelle never finished her painting. Somehow, that makes it even more precious. We'll hang it in our daughter's room when she's older, so she'll know it was her mother's last gift. The letters are ready too. The first will reach her on her 4th birthday. The recipes, the words, the memories Michelle left, these we will pass to her slowly as she grows. We've arranged survivors' benefits for her, and we're saving them in a college fund, so she'll one day have the choices Michelle never did. That's all I can manage to say for now. In a few weeks, I'll delete this account as Michelle asked me to. My husband and I have promised to raise our daughter with all the love we can give, with the same boundless love Michelle gave her. Thank you, all of you, for your kind words and for holding space for her story. Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22, still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare emotionally or financially. And the reason for all of it was my sister Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me. By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months, and somehow it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything, they just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law, but what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day, hysterical, and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out, and just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mum threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me they truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe. I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me to no explanation, no chance to defend myself, and Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway. When I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together. Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless. My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming, but slowly I taught myself to move forward with or without their support. Years went by, and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career. And just last week, I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes, but the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée Lisa posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post. For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, he explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward. After all, years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. He also admitted that since he'd blocked me back then, it felt strange to just pop back up in my life. But what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said things just happened. To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie. Pete admitted he was furious when he found out. Instead of thinking clearly, he blocked everyone in my family, me included. Looking back, he knows it was the wrong move, but at the time, anger clouded everything. The email itself included screenshots of conversations between Hannah and Frank, messages where they openly confessed their love, joked about how easy it was to fool Pete, and arranged secret meetups. Hannah had even signed off using her rarely mentioned middle name, something only a few people knew. There was no denying it. Reading those messages was surreal. For the first time in years, I had undeniable proof. Hannah had lied about everything. I eventually confronted Pete in person after realizing he was in Lisa's Facebook friends list. He admitted that Emily, my friend who'd originally been accused, had told him her side years ago. He just never told me because he didn't want to stir things up again. He regretted it now because if he had spoken up earlier, I could have cleared my name long ago. Still, he was willing to help me now. Pete and I agreed that Hannah's lies had destroyed enough lives, and neither of us wanted her manipulations to stand unchallenged any longer. The truth was clear. Hannah had weaponized her family's trust to protect herself, even if it meant sacrificing me. She dragged my name through the mud, convinced my parents to disown me, all to keep her own reputation intact while she pursued her affair, and for the first time in years, I had the evidence to finally set the record straight. I'm certain my sister never once tried to tell our parents the truth. Instead, she kept feeding them lies during the divorce, and they swallowed every word without hesitation. She knew that if our parents ever discovered she was the one who cheated, she'd be in serious trouble, and she just couldn't allow that. Well, now the truth is finally out, and I'm going to use it to destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine all those years ago. I wasn't sure if my parents were still living in the same house since I hadn't seen them in 7 years, but an old neighbor confirmed they never moved. Even better, Hannah still lived with them. That didn't surprise me at all. She was always lazy and hated responsibility. Living off aging parents while they did everything for her was exactly her style. 2 days ago, Pete and I showed up. Unannounced, my mum opened the door and we pushed our way inside before she could react. My dad and Hannah were sitting in the living room, the happy family reunited, but only for a moment. Their faces twisted as soon as they saw us. My dad immediately started shouting, threatening to call the police if we didn't leave. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but only after reading the documents we brought. My parents looked confused, while Hannah turned pale and bolted to her room. I figured she was trying to avoid the inevitable, but there was no escaping it. Pete pulled out the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah's messages with Frank while I explained the real story. Pete also revealed how Hannah had been forced to give up our grandmother's diamond heirloom ring to settle the divorce, since her teacher's salary couldn't cover the payout. My parents were stunned. We sat there watching as the drama unfolded. My dad demanded answers from Hannah, but when she tried lying yet again, even with the evidence right in front of her, he'd had enough. He packed her belongings, shoved them into a bag, and kicked her out of the house on the spot. I didn't need to be told twice. Pete and I walked out together, leaving Hannah begging our parents to let her back in exactly the way I had once begged them years ago. It was the sweetest revenge. I felt nothing but satisfaction. A couple days later, Hannah showed up at my place, demanding I fix things with our parents. I don't even know how she found my address, but I told her point blank that I owed her nothing. She ruined my life, and I simply returned the favor. We were even now. Apparently, she has no pride left, because the moment I said that, she broke down sobbing, calling me a monster. I honestly didn't care. I put on my headphones, turned up the music, and let Lisa keep working peacefully in her office. Eventually, Hannah left, but not before scrawling a message on my door with a marker, reminding me that I'm a vengeful monster. To be honest, I don't feel bad about what I did. I don't think I'm the villain here. I didn't lie or scheme like she did. I just exposed the truth. So, am I really the bad guy for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out of our parents' home 7 years after she blamed me for her divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Update 1: Hannah didn't stop bothering me. Even after a week, she kept calling non-stop 14 times in one day. I finally threatened to involve the police, and that made her back off, at least for now. I have no idea how she keeps getting my number after I block her, but apparently she has her friends add me into group calls from different numbers. She's tried to guilt trip me, saying her teacher's salary isn't enough to live on. But no, that's not the real issue. What she really hates is finally having to pay rent, utilities, and groceries herself. And honestly, that's not my problem. As for my parents, they aren't much better. They found me on Facebook after seeing Lisa's engagement post. Now they're suddenly interested in being part of my life again. They even hinted that they expect to be invited to my wedding. They still haven't apologized, but somehow think they deserve to show up on one of the most important days of my life. Lisa and I laughed reading their messages because they were so delusional it almost seemed like a bad joke, but in truth, the whole thing is more sad than funny. Update 2: Hannah showed up at my house again, even after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was getting ready to leave for work, but she stopped me by flopping onto the hood of my car, refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was incredibly annoying, and this time I actually called the police. They took her away while she screamed and cried, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Unfortunately for her, nobody bought it. It took some time to file the official report against her, but as soon as I did, I rushed to work so this incident wouldn't ruin my day. I figured my parents would bail her out since she's their favorite, and I was right. They sent her home and then followed up with a long message telling me I had been too harsh and unfair to them over a mistake they supposedly made almost 10 years ago. It was laughable. Nothing my sister and parents did to me back then could ever be called merciful or fair. No mercy stopped them from literally throwing me out of the house with nowhere to go. So now, I see no reason to offer forgiveness or kindness. I messaged my parents saying that after all these years, they had lost any right to tell me what I can or cannot do, and that they should stop deluding themselves. I haven't blocked them yet, had to check the message first, but I will. Soon, hopefully. Then I can finally cut that whole family out of my life for good. Update 3: I just got home from work, checked my socials, and saw that my parents sent me another long message. Lisa and I read it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. These poor people don't realize that nothing they say or do now can hurt me. I just laughed at how pathetic they are. They still think we're a family and announced they'd taken Hannah back, claiming both of their children deserve a second chance, as if I was ever in the wrong. They expected Lisa and me to visit them for dinner before my wedding to civilly resolve our differences. Too bold of them to assume I'd ever want them anywhere near my wedding. We laughed at their absurd message and I responded that I had zero interest in any invitations from them. I'm perfectly happy living my life without them just like I have for the last 7 years. They made it clear long ago that I'm better off without them. I'm grateful it took me so long to realize that. I no longer need them or their so-called forgiveness. They can continue playing happy family with Hannah all they want. I don't care. After sending that last message, I blocked them permanently. That's it. I'm done. I'm sure they'll try to contact me again somehow, but it doesn't matter. Lisa is the only family I need, and I'm happier than I've ever been with just her. My parents and sister never could see past their own noses, and I doubt they ever will. Next time they try to reach out, they'll be talking to my lawyer. My mum and unemployed sister are trying to take 80% of my father's inheritance. They nearly ruined his business's reputation and now accuse me of embezzlement. I'm 32, and this has been one of the hardest weeks of my life. My dad suddenly passed away from a heart attack, and on top of grieving, I'm forced to deal with ugly family drama. Never in a million years did I think I'd face something like this at my age, but here we are. My parents divorced when I was 15, and it was brutal. My mum cheated on my dad with his best friend, which tore our family apart. My younger sister, Emmy, she's 28 now, sided with mum. I chose to live with dad, and things were never the same between us again. Dad was a self-made businessman. He started with a tiny electronics repair shop in our garage when I was a kid. I still remember spending weekends helping him sort parts and study circuit diagrams. Over the years, he grew that little shop into a chain of stores across the state. His story always inspired me. He worked relentlessly and achieved everything through grit and perseverance. After the divorce, he buried himself even more in work. I think it was his way of coping with the betrayal. Many nights I'd wake up and find him hunched over spreadsheets at AM, planning new strategies. Despite the long hours, he always made time for me. We had breakfast together every morning, and he never missed a single school event. Eventually, he remarried a wonderful woman named Susan. She never tried to replace my mum, but she was kind, supportive, and a true partner for my dad. They traveled, volunteered, and seemed genuinely happy together. It made me feel good to see him smiling again. Meanwhile, mum's life went downhill. Her fling with dad's ex-best friend didn't last, and since then she's been struggling financially. She always claimed dad cheated her in the divorce, but from what I know, the settlement was fair. He even let her keep the family home, which she later had to sell because of her own poor money management. Over the years, she bounced from one job to another: real estate, retail, catering. Every time she started with enthusiasm but gave up as soon as things got difficult. Emmy followed the same path, dropped out of college, hopped from job to job, talked about big dreams but never saw them through. She leaned on mum financially and emotionally, and together they lived in this strange bubble of resentment against my dad. Yesterday we held dad's funeral. It was heartbreaking, but also overwhelming to see how many people came to pay their respects. The church was packed with colleagues, employees, and people from the community who admired him. I gave the eulogy, sharing stories about his kindness, work ethic, and the lessons he taught me about honesty, resilience, and helping others. Speaking through the tears was hard, but I wanted to honor him properly. What stunned me was that mum and Emmy showed up. They hadn't spoken to dad in years. They sat in the very back, whispering to each other. At first, I was glad they came, but later, I overheard them talking, and what I heard made me sick. Mum said, "Now's our chance to finally get what we deserve." Emmy nodded, saying they should fight for at least 80% of the inheritance. Their plan? Challenge the will, claim dad wasn't of sound mind, and argue that mum supported him for years while he built the business. I couldn't believe it. We were literally standing in the church at his funeral, and they were already plotting to grab his money. Dad always taught me to work for what you earn, and here they were, scheming to steal what wasn't theirs. It felt like betrayal, not just of me, but of everything he stood for. I wanted to confront them right then, but I held back. It was Dad's funeral, not the place for a scene. Instead, I kept quiet and decided to stay alert. In the days after, I noticed Mum and Emmy acting suspiciously sweet towards Susan, completely unlike them. They were trying to win her over, hoping she'd soften. I even caught Emmy snooping around Dad's office, pretending to look for family photos, but obviously searching for documents to use in court. Yesterday we finally sat down with Dad's lawyer for the reading of the will. Susan was quiet, still shaken from losing him. Mum and Emmy kept shifting in their seats, glancing at each other nervously. I tried to keep my face neutral, though inside I knew exactly what they were hoping for. As expected, Dad left the business to me since. I'd worked alongside him for years and understood it best. Susan inherited the house and a large portion of his savings. He also made several charitable donations, true to his values, and Mum, Emmy, they weren't even mentioned. Mum and my sister only got symbolic amounts, $10,000 each. The moment the lawyer finished reading the will, my mother exploded. She started yelling about how unfair it was, how she had supported my father for years while he built his company, and how she deserved a bigger share. Conveniently, she left out the part where her affair destroyed their marriage. Emmy jumped in right after, claiming it wasn't right that I inherited so much since I had already benefited by living with Dad after the divorce. She accused him of favoritism, saying he punished her just because she sided with Mum back then. It was obvious they had rehearsed this whole performance. That's when I snapped. I told them I had overheard their little scheme at the funeral. I called them out for plotting to contest the will and trying to take advantage of the situation. I said they should be ashamed of themselves, thinking only about money while the rest of us were grieving. Mum tried to backpedal, saying I didn't understand how hard things were for her after the divorce. She painted herself as a victim, glossing over the fact that she squandered everything she got in the settlement. Emmy accused me of always taking Dad's side and never caring about them, but I stood my ground. I reminded them how they treated Dad all those years, cutting him off, rejecting his attempts at reconciliation. I pointed out that he didn't owe them anything. The fact that he left them even a token amount was proof of his generosity. The meeting ended with Mum and Emmy storming out, threatening to bring in lawyers. Susan broke down crying from the stress. The attorney reassured us that the will was solid and very hard to challenge, but he warned that if they did file a lawsuit, things could get ugly and drag on for a long time. Since then, my phone hasn't stopped buzzing. Relatives keep reaching out with their opinions. Some are on my side, saying Mum and Emmy are just being greedy and that Dad had every right to decide what happened with his estate. Others say I'm being too harsh and should try to see their perspective. A few even suggested I hand over part of my inheritance for the sake of peace in the family, but I refuse. Dad worked himself to the bone for everything he built. He alone had the right to decide how his estate would be divided. Mum forfeited any claim the day she cheated and walked away. Emmy chose her side back then, and she barely had any relationship with Dad for years. I've spent the last several days digging into Dad's business records, determined to be ready in case they take this to court. From everything I can see, Mum's claims of supporting him while he built the company are exaggerated. The truth is, the business only really took off after the divorce, when Dad threw himself completely into work. I also spoke with longtime employees who had been with him from the early days. They shared stories of his dedication, working nights, weekends, never slowing down. One of them, Jim, told me how Dad gave him a chance when no one else would. Jim had a criminal record from his youth and couldn't find a job anywhere, but Dad hired him as a janitor and later helped him rise all the way to store manager. There are dozens of stories like that. Dad didn't just build a company, he built opportunities for people. Hearing those stories has only strengthened my resolve to defend his legacy. He wasn't building this business for greed. He wanted to create something lasting, something that supported entire families. I can't let my mother and sister's selfishness put that at risk, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't conflicted. A part of me wonders if I'm being too rigid. Should I try to compromise just to keep the peace? I don't want to go against Dad's final wishes, but the idea of a drawn-out legal battle makes me sick. It would drain money, energy, and cause even more family drama. Right now, I'm focusing on supporting Susan and keeping the company steady. Losing Dad was already devastating, and on top of that, fighting off my mum and sister's greed is exhausting. I barely sleep, constantly replaying that confrontation in my head. Part of me feels guilty for creating a scene so soon after his death, but another part of me is furious they would stoop so low. I worry most about Susan. Since the will was read, she's been almost silent, crushed by the stress. She adored my father, and watching his memory drag through mud is breaking her. The company has also been shaken. Dad was its heart and soul, and stepping into his shoes feels overwhelming. The last thing I need is a lawsuit distracting me From keeping everything afloat, I've even considered offering Mum and Emmy more money than what Dad left them just to make them go away. But I know the risk that giving in might only encourage them to demand more. And most importantly, it would betray Dad's wishes. Last night, I found an old family photo album in Dad's office. One picture stopped me cold, the day of the first store's opening. Dad stood there cutting the ribbon, Mum smiling beside him, and Emmy and I clapping as little kids. We looked so happy, so proud. And I wondered, how did we end up here? How did that family turn into this? So here's my dilemma. Am I wrong for confronting my mum and sister so harshly, for standing my ground on honouring Dad's will? Should I fight this battle to the end, or try to compromise for the sake of family peace? I honestly don't know. If Mum and Emmy truly had zero chance of winning in court, part of me thought about just offering them a little more money to make them go away. Not a stake in the company, never. But if Dad left them each $10,000, maybe I'd offer 20-30K just to avoid endless headaches and move on with my life. Because in the end, nerves cost more than money. But if there was any chance they could actually succeed, maybe it would take a bigger offer to settle. Still, I understood what many people, and honestly what I myself wanted deep down felt, that Mum and Emmy deserved nothing. If the case went to trial and they lost, they'd not only walk away empty-handed, but also have to cover court costs. That would have been its own kind of justice karma, really. Still, my own instincts told me to at least consider offering something small just to avoid a dragged-out war. Update when it's been about a month since my last post. Unfortunately, I don't have good news. Things with Mum and Emmy spiraled way beyond anything I could have imagined. At this point, it feels like I'm living inside some ridiculous soap opera. Except it's my actual life, and there's no dramatic background music to warn me before everything collapses. First, I want to thank everyone who commented on my first post. Your advice and support were a lifeline. To those who told me to stand firm, thank you. Your words helped me stay grounded. And to those who suggested compromise, I truly appreciate that perspective too. I even tried, but more on that later. So, where do I start? I guess with the lawsuit. Yep. Mum and Emmy officially hired an attorney to contest Dad's will. About a week after the reading, I was served court papers. Their lawyer has a reputation for being ruthless in inheritance battles. The lawsuit claims that Dad was not of sound mind when he wrote his will, and that Mum supposedly contributed significantly to building the business during the marriage, so much so that she's entitled to most of it. They're demanding 80% of the estate. Exactly what I overheard them plotting at the funeral. It's absurd. But absurd or not, it's already causing real damage. Legal fees are piling up fast. I had to hire my own lawyer. Thankfully, Tom, Dad's longtime friend and legal advisor, agreed to represent us. He knows the history of both our family and the company, which is a huge help. Even with his discounted rates though, this isn't cheap. Tom is confident the will is airtight, and that Mum and Emmy don't have a case. But he also warned me these disputes can drag on for months, sometimes years, and the lawsuit isn't even the worst part. Mum and Emmy launched a smear campaign against me and Susan. They're spreading disgusting rumors telling people Susan manipulated Dad into rewriting the will, that I've been embezzling money from the company for years, and that we plan to sell the business and fire everyone. Total lies. But rumors travel fast. I've spent countless hours on the phone reassuring employees that their jobs are safe. Even some of our long-time customers started asking if they should take their business elsewhere. Last week, I overheard 2 new hires whispering in the break room, wondering if they should start job hunting in case mass layoffs happen. I had to call an emergency staff meeting to squash the gossip. It kills me that it's come to this, that I have to defend both myself and my father's memory to people who worked beside him for decades. The accusation of theft especially infuriates me. Dad was meticulous about the company's finances, and he drilled that same discipline into me. The thought that I would steal from the very business he poured his life into makes my blood boil. I spent the past week going through financial records with our accountant, preparing evidence in case the claim makes it into court. Susan is struggling more than anyone. She isn't used to this level of scheming and backstabbing. At one point, she even said maybe we should give Mum and Emmy what they want just to make it stop. I had to remind her again and again that giving in is exactly what they want. The other night, I found her crying in Dad's office, clutching one of his old sweaters, the one he always wore when he worked late. Through her tears, she looked at me and asked, Would he really want all this fighting? My heart broke. I tried reaching out directly to Mum and Emmy, phone calls, texts hoping to reason with them. They ignored everything. Now all communication goes through their lawyer. It feels like they've forgotten we're even family. I did run into Emmy at the store last week. I thought maybe without Mum around I could get through to her. But the second she saw me, her face went cold. She accused me of turning the family against her and stealing Dad's money. I tried to remind her how they treated him after the divorce, but she just smirked and said, "You were always Dad's golden boy," then she walked away. It was like talking to a stranger, not the sister I grew up with. Meanwhile, the rest of the family is splitting apart. Some of my aunts and uncles are furious at Mum and Emmy and fully on my side. Others think I'm being too harsh and should just give them more money for the sake of peace. My cousin Jack even yelled at me during a family dinner, saying my stubbornness is what's tearing us apart. I left early just to avoid making a scene. That dinner was supposed to be a chance for us all to come together, remember Dad, and support each other. Instead, it turned into a battlefield. My Aunt Sarah, Mum's sister, even threw little digs about how some people forget where they come from once they get a little money. This is my life now. A nightmare I can't wake up from. Update. #2 that dinner with the family ended in total chaos. My uncle Pietar, Dad's brother, fired back at my cousin Jack, saying some people never learn to value hard work. Jack started shouting, and from there everything just unraveled. Meanwhile, I've been throwing myself into the business, trying to keep it afloat no matter what. Dad built this company from the ground up, and I'll be damned if I let it fall apart on my watch. Thankfully, most of the employees have been amazing. Many of them have known me since I was a kid, and they keep sharing stories about Dad that helped me push through. One moment that hit me especially hard, Jim the guy dad once gave a second chance to I mentioned him before came into my office the other day carrying a stack of old photographs. They were from years of company events, picnics, Christmas parties, store openings, and in every single picture there was Dad, sleeves rolled up, working right alongside everyone else. Jim looked at me and said, "This is who your father was. This is what you're fighting for." I can't even put into words how much that meant, but the toll is real. I barely sleep. I've lost weight. Friends keep telling me I look awful. My schedule is nothing but lawyers, paperwork, and damage. Control. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror and hardly recognize the exhausted, hollow-eyed man staring back. For a split second, I wonder if it's worth it. The worst part is the doubt. I keep asking myself, am I making the right choice? Would it be easier to just pay them off so this nightmare ends? But then I remember the look on Dad's face when he told me he was leaving the business to me. I can't betray that trust. I won't. Tom, our lawyer, reminds me constantly, this is a marathon, not a sprint. He says lawsuits like this can drag on for years. So I've started documenting everything, every nasty rumor, every ignored call, every attempt I've made to reach out. We're also gathering testimony from long-time employees about Dad's work ethic and how the business grew after the divorce. To counter Mum's ridiculous claims that she helped build it. At the same time, I've realized I need to fight not just in court, but also in the court of public opinion. I'm planning a company-wide meeting to directly address the rumors and reassure everyone that their jobs are safe. I also intend to personally call some of our biggest clients to maintain their trust. Susan and I are even working on starting a scholarship fund in Dad's name for local kids who want to study business or electronics. We figured it's not only a way to honor his memory, but also to show the community that, like him, we believe in giving back. The response so far has been incredible. Even my old high school principal suggested we award the first scholarship at this year's graduation ceremony. It's a small light in a very dark time. As for Mum and Emmy, I've stopped trying to reason with them. If they want to communicate, it'll be through lawyers. It hurts to imagine what Dad would think, seeing his family torn apart like this. I wish I could tell you they came to their senses, that we patched things up and became one big happy family again. But that's not reality. The truth is messy, painful, and full of disappointment for those who told me in my first post to seek compromise. I want you to know I really did try. I offered them a trust fund larger than the $10,000 Dad had originally left, but nowhere near the insane 80% they demanded. They flat out rejected it. Their counteroffer, if you can even call it, that was that they dropped the lawsuit. If I gave them 70% of the inheritance and walked away from the company entirely, When Tom told me that, I almost laughed. It's so detached from reality, it made me wonder if we even live in the same world anymore, daughter. So here I am, preparing for a long, ugly legal war with my own mother and sister. Definitely not what I expected when we buried Dad just months ago. But this is the path, and I'm walking it. What weighs on me the most is knowing that no matter how this ends, our family will never be the same. Even if by some miracle Mum and Emmy dropped everything tomorrow, too much has been said. Too many lines have been crossed. Trust is gone. Love. I don't even know if it was ever there from their side, but I'm not fighting alone. Susan has been my rock through all of this. She misses Dad, she hates the rumors, she feels the weight of the lawsuit, but she's still here, reminding me what we're fighting for whenever I start to doubt. And beyond her, I've got Dad's old friends, employees who feel more like family than blood ever did, and loyal clients reaching out to show support. Maybe that's what Dad was trying to teach me all along, that family isn't just blood. Family is the people who stand beside you, share your values, and help you be the best version of yourself. I'll write another update when I have news. In the meantime, if anyone has advice on surviving baseless lawsuits or pushing back against smear campaigns, I'm all ears. And thank you again truly for all the support. It means more than you know. Hopefully, the next update will bring better news. Final update, what a year it's been. I kept putting off writing this last update partly because life stayed hectic, but mostly because I wanted to be absolutely sure everything was over before sharing it with you. Now it is, and I promised to keep you in the loop. So here we go. Let's start with the lawsuit. After months of legal battles and mountains of paperwork, we finally had our day in court. It was exhausting beyond words. Mum and Emmy's lawyer pulled out every trick he had, painting Mum as the long-suffering wife who sacrificed everything for Dad's business only to be cruelly cast aside. He even brought in so-called experts to testify about the emotional labor of a spouse being the foundation of a company's success. Theatrics were off the charts. He had Mum take the stand, telling stories about lonely nights while Dad was at the office conveniently leaving out her affair with his best friend. But Tom, our lawyer, was ready. He presented proof of Dad's endless hours of work, employee testimonies about how the company really grew after the divorce, and financial records showing Mum had already received a fair settlement back then. He also didn't let her gloss over the affair. One of the most powerful moments came from Jim, the same employee Dad gave a second chance to. He told the court how Dad believed in him when no one else would, and how he watched firsthand as Dad's determination built the business. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room except for Mum and Emmy, who sat stone-faced, like they'd swallowed something bitter, but the knockout blow came from something completely unexpected. Remember how Emmy had snooped around Dad's office after the funeral? Turns out she did find something Dad's old journal from the divorce years. They thought it would strengthen their case, maybe show Dad's state of mind. Instead, it destroyed them. When Tom got it during discovery, it told a very different story. Pages about sleepless nights, juggling payroll, taking out a second mortgage on the house to keep the company alive. Notes about Mum's indifference to the business, her reckless spending, and yes, her affair. I'll never forget one entry Tom read aloud. Dad wrote about a night when everything was on the brink of collapse. He came home desperate to talk money, only to find Mum out partying, having spent hundreds on a new outfit. He described how alone he felt, how close he was to giving up. But then he wrote about quietly checking on me while I slept. And that moment gave him the strength to keep going. For my son, he wrote, I will build a legacy he can be proud of. Hearing those words in court nearly broke me. But they also reminded me why I was fighting. After that, things moved quickly. The judge ruled in our favour, threw out their case, and ordered Mum and Emmy to cover our legal fees. On paper, it was a total victory. But it didn't feel like joy, just relief, and a heavy sadness that it ever came to this, and that wasn't the end. Remember the smear campaign they'd been running? It backfired. Some of the nastier rumours, like embezzlement and claims that we planned to sell the company, were legally deemed defamatory. We didn't sue, but the threat alone forced them to issue a public retraction. Watching them admit they'd spread lies was surreal. They looked small, defeated, nothing like the bold, angry women who started all of this. Part of me pitted them, but mostly I was angry for everything they'd put us through. The fallout was massive. Relatives who once doubted me or even sided with them turned away once the truth came out. The business, though shaken at first by the negativity, ultimately grew stronger. Employees and clients saw our transparency, our willingness to stand and fight, and it built trust instead of eroding it. We held a company-wide meeting afterward, where I laid everything out honestly and shared our plans moving forward. I was nervous people had lost faith, but when I looked around, all I saw were supportive faces, and the scholarship fund we set up in Dad's name, it's already changed lives. We've helped a dozen local kids chase their college dreams. At the first ceremony, handing out those scholarships and telling Dad's story about his belief in hard work and giving back felt like the perfect way to honor him. On a personal level, this whole ordeal has changed me. I've learned how quickly people can turn against you, but I've also learned who truly stands by your side. I found family in Susan, in our loyal employees, in the friends who never wavered even in all of you, who listened, advised, and sent words of encouragement when I needed them most. As for Mum and Emmy, I haven't spoken to them since the verdict. Maybe I never will. That's a wound time alone won't fix. So here it is, the final chapter. Thank you for following me through this storm. Your support meant more than I can ever say. It's time to close this book and focus on building the future Dad dreamed about. This will be my last update. My wife and her best friend accused me of cheating and lost their minds when they found out I wasn't. I'm 31. My wife is 29. Last year, we had a baby. The birth was traumatic, and my wife developed postpartum depression. Originally, she planned to return to work after giving birth, but the challenges were so intense that we decided to wait until our daughter turned 1 and then reassess the situation. She attends weekly appointments with a psychiatrist. Since my wife stayed home full-time, I had to work more. We discussed this in advance before making the decision. A few weeks ago, my boss offered me a project that required a lot of overtime. It was a fantastic opportunity to earn extra money and advance my career. I talked it over with my wife, and she agreed that I should take it for 4 weeks while I worked on the project. My mother-in-law and my wife's best friend, Jessie, helped with some of the responsibilities I usually handled. Jessie is a stay-at-home mum with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. She started coming over during the day to watch the kids alongside my wife. 3 weeks into the project, it became clear we'd need a few more weeks to finish. That evening, I came home and spoke to my wife about it. She said it was fine. Over the next few days, however, she became very cold. I didn't think much of it, as her mood swings over the past few months weren't unusual, and I tried not to take it personally. During the last week of the project, I came home one evening and saw Jessie still at our house. I greeted her and my wife then went to check on our daughter. Before I reached her room, I overheard Jessie say something like, "He doesn't even stop to say hi to you, that's definitely a sign." I turned around and asked what she meant. My wife immediately started crying while Jessie accused me of cheating. Jessie said I must hate my wife because of her postpartum depression and that she wasn't attractive to me anymore since gaining weight after pregnancy. None of this was true. I've been doing my best to support my wife through her depression and take care of our family, and I think she looks beautiful as she is. She simply wasn't in the mood for intimacy, and I didn't pressure her. Then Jessie demanded to see my phone. I said no. She claimed that was proof I was guilty. I told my wife she could check my phone if she wanted. She nodded. Something inside me broke. It hurt that she believed I was having an affair and that she didn't trust me after everything we'd been through. She looked through my phone. There was nothing incriminating. Jessie then accused me of deleting evidence and started shouting, waking our daughter. I told her to leave the house. Eventually, she left, and I went to calm our daughter while my wife sat on the couch crying. Once our daughter was asleep again, I sat next to my wife and tried talking to her. She admitted she'd been worried ever since I started working overtime. I reminded her we had discussed the project beforehand, and she had agreed I should take it. She said it was suspicious that the project timeline had been extended. I explained that sometimes these things happen and showed her messages, emails, and payroll records proving the overtime. She apologized for doubting me and said she trusted me again. It was just that Jessie kept telling her these things were signs. I asked my wife why she trusted Jessie more than me and why she didn't come to me first with her concerns. She had no answer. A couple of weeks later, the project ended. I've reduced my workload a bit to spend more time with my wife and daughter, but I feel completely drained trying to accommodate her and anxious, because deep down I know she doesn't fully trust me. I wonder what will happen next time I take on a project or have a work assignment, or if I go on a business trip. Will this cycle of accusations happen again? I've tried bringing it up a few times, but my wife says it's not the right time. She's tired and sad. I try to respect her feelings, but I can't help wondering if there's room for my feelings in our family anymore. I don't know what to do in this situation. Does anyone have advice on how to move forward? Update: 4 days later that evening, I approached my wife and told her I wanted to find a therapist. I didn't connect it to her accusations or anything specific, I just said I was struggling. She shrugged. She said, "Do whatever you want." The next day, I returned from work to find our bedroom and my home office completely ransacked. Papers and personal items were scattered everywhere. My wife was nowhere to be found, and our daughter was crying in her room. She had left her alone and turned off her phone. I immediately tried calling her parents and a few friends, but no one had seen her. Growing more anxious, I called my mum to see if she could watch our daughter while I searched. Before my mum could arrive, my wife came back, driving the car. Jessie, her friend, stayed in the car and hadn't entered the house since I had kicked her out because she was insulted by my behavior. My wife walked in, visibly upset and in tears. I asked what had happened, initially fearing that someone had broken in. Instead, she started yelling at me, accusing me of cheating and claiming that my visits to a psychiatrist were a cover to see a mistress. I tried to calm her and insisted that none of it was true, but she attacked me and broke my nose. After realizing what she had done, she slumped onto the couch in a dazed state, staring blankly at the wall. I quickly went to my daughter's room and locked the door. I called my mum, who was already on her way, to explain the situation, and also reached out to my mother-in-law to ask her to come and look after my wife. I packed a bag for our daughter, and my mum and I left with her. My wife didn't even look up. We dropped our daughter off at my father's house and then went to the emergency room to treat my nose. In the process, I stained my mum's new Subaru with blood. For now, my daughter and I are staying with my parents, while my wife is with her parents. I am considering filing for a restraining order against Jessie. My wife and I are separating. I still love her, but I cannot live with someone who causes me harm and could potentially endanger our child. I am holding off on divorce, hoping she will receive the necessary treatment so we might repair our relationship. My in-laws mentioned that they are considering inpatient care at a local facility. I have also documented the entire chaotic incident in case it becomes relevant for custody proceedings. My heart aches because I know this isn't really my wife, it's her mental illness, but I have to protect myself, our daughter, and give my wife space to recover. I hope this is the right decision. Ultimately, I concluded that to safeguard my daughter, I must file a police report. I was heading to the station when, 3 days later, my wife died early Monday morning. She had become convinced by her friend Jessie that I was having an affair, which was entirely false. She lost her sanity. She was with her parents, who had planned to admit her to a hospital for treatment. On Sunday evening, she had come to my parents' house, demanding to take our daughter. She had left her alone for a few hours previously and had attacked me. I refused. I offered her supervised time with the child in the presence of both sets of parents, but she refused, upset, and eventually left. A few hours later, she crashed her parents' car into a tree and died. Jessie visited yesterday, crying to see me and our daughter. She claimed she planned to speak at my wife's funeral and that she had arranged it with my in-laws, but informed me out of courtesy. I told her she would not be allowed to speak. We argued and she left, saying that I wasn't the only person who loved my wife. I spoke with my in-laws, who insist that Jessie should be allowed to speak because she had known my wife since childhood, and they are close to her. I fear that giving in to their pressure could damage my relationship with them. At the same time, the thought of Jessie standing at my wife's funeral makes me physically sick. I don't think I could bear hearing her, knowing she had taken pleasure in my wife's mental decline and had left our daughter alone, yet I don't trust my own judgment right now. My mind is clouded, my parents are divided over what to do, and I don't have the energy to reach out to friends. So once again, I am asking, what should I do? My grandma gave me a penthouse for my birthday, but my mum tried to take it away to please her new husbandi everyone. 3 days ago I turned 15, and my grandma gave me the most unbelievable gift. She signed over the deed to her penthouse apartment to me. She doesn't even live there full time. She has a house in the suburbs and only stays in the penthouse when she comes into the city. I was over the moon. It felt like, for the first time in a long while, something good was happening in my life, because honestly, this last year has been absolute hell. It started when my dad walked out. He'd always been a complete workaholic, barely around, but the divorce still blindsided me. My mum never even told me directly. One day, I just noticed he was gone. Later, I found out he had already filed for divorce almost a year before. By the time I realized what was happening, it was basically over. He didn't even say goodbye to me, just left me one last message, be good. That was it. I haven't seen him since. When the divorce finalized, Mum got the house and full custody of me and my little brother. Dad technically had visitation rights, but he never used them. He just vanished from my life. Then, about 2 months ago, Mum dropped another bomb. She'd been dating someone, let's call him Robert, for a few months, and now they were engaged. I barely had time to process that she was even seeing someone before she announced he'd be my stepdad. It felt rushed, forced, and honestly pretty desperate. How do you even know someone well enough in 5 months to marry them? When I finally met him, he seemed distant and cold with me. With my 4-year-old brother though, completely different. Playful, warm, like he was auditioning for best stepdad ever. At first, I brushed it off as him just being more comfortable with little kids. But a couple of weeks later, Mum sat me down and told me the real reason behind their whirlwind. Engagement. Robert had been offered a new job in another state. They were moving, and here's the kicker, they planned to take my little brother, but leave me behind. With my grandma, when I asked why, Mum basically admitted it was Robert's idea. He wanted my brother because he was still young enough to bond with, but me? At 15, I was too old to ever become his real daughter. Plus, apparently, I'd upset him when I said 5 months wasn't long enough to know someone before marrying them. He decided I was stuck in the past and would never accept him. And my mum agreed. She told me I'd be better off staying with grandma. That it would be easier. I can't describe the pain I felt in that moment. My dad had already abandoned me, and now my mum was essentially choosing her new husband over me. I love my grandma dearly, and moving in with her wasn't the issue. She's the kindest, most compassionate woman I know, but to hear my own mother say I wasn't wanted, that crushed me. I told her I didn't want to wait until the move. I wanted to live with grandma immediately. Within a few days, I'd packed my things and left. Those last couple of days at Mum's house was silent. I didn't speak to her, didn't hug her goodbye. Honestly, I didn't think she deserved it. The only person I said goodbye to was my little brother, because I knew I'd miss him like crazy. Now I'm at grandma's and life already feels lighter. She shows me real love, not conditional affection based on what some guy thinks. Even though the commute to school is longer, I don't care. It's worth it. Every night I call my brother to talk before bed. It hurts that I can only reach him through Mum, but I do it anyway for him. For the first time in months, I feel like I might actually be okay. I don't really talk to my mum anymore. We only speak when it's absolutely necessary. 3 days ago, I had my birthday, but honestly, it wasn't me who organized anything. My grandma secretly put everything together. She found a couple of my close school friends through my Facebook, invited them along with some relatives, and surprised me with a little party at her house. I hadn't expected anything, so it lifted my spirits a bit, especially after how down I'd been ever since Mum sent me to live with grandma. But after we cut the cake, grandma announced her gift to me and I was completely stunned. She told everyone that for now, her lawyer would act as trustee of her apartment, but the moment I turn 18, full ownership will pass to me. It was the best news I'd gotten in ages. I didn't even think of telling my mum about it. Turns out, someone else did. Yesterday I found out that one of the party guests must have told her. That evening, Mum called me, sounding way too cheerful for someone about to drop a bomb. She said she knew about grandma's gift and that after talking with Robert, her husband, they decided he wanted to adopt me. But there was a catch. I'd have to convince grandma to transfer the deed into his name first. She genuinely expected me to be happy about this, as if it meant I could finally join them. I wasn't. I told her straight up that it would never happen and that she didn't need to call me anymore. Then I hung up. A few minutes later, she tried again, and when I didn't pick up, she sent me a long message. The summary? She said she was sorry if it upset me that she lives by Robert's rules, but I needed to understand that after her divorce, he was the only one who truly supported her emotionally and financially. She claimed Dad wasn't generous, that The divorce settlement and child support were laughable, and that she was lucky he at least left her the house. She admitted Robert wasn't nice to me, but excused it by saying his past relationships failed because of kids from earlier marriages. So I should be understanding. She also said she never abandoned me because she left me with Grandma, who she knew would take good care of me, and that now she'd arranged everything so I could finally come live with them. She ended the message with, "I know you're upset, but I know you love me and I love you. Just text back, I love you." At first, a small part of me felt bad reading it, but the ending made me furious. She wanted me to bend to Robert's demands just like she does. It was selfish, weak, and pathetic. Honestly, it felt like she had completely lost herself. Half an hour later, I texted back that I will never do what Robert wants, and if she wanted to leave with him, she should just leave me here with Grandma like she planned in the first place. I didn't feel like I had anything else to say because her behavior had disappointed me so much. When I told Grandma about it, she was firm. She would never, under any circumstances, sign the deed over to Robert. She barely knows him, doesn't trust him, and believes he'd sell the place right away, leaving me with nothing. Honestly, she's probably right, and I'm glad I stood my ground, but Mum wasn't ready to take no for an answer. This morning, while I was at school, she showed up at Grandma's with my little brother. When I got home, Grandma told me Mum had come to talk face to face about the offer I supposedly ignored. I made it clear I hadn't ignored anything I had already replied and made myself very clear. This is not happening. I want her to stick to her original plan because I'm not about to convince Grandma to sign over her property to Robert. We don't trust him, and I made that perfectly clear. So I honestly don't get why she keeps pretending not to understand. I was harsh and answered in a sharp tone, but can you really blame me? That's when Mum started crying, saying she just wanted to make everyone happy, but no matter what she does, it never works out. I was furious watching her sit in the living room sobbing, because in reality, I'm the one who should have been crying. I'm the one both of my parents walked away from. I told her to stop and said she had twisted everything. She wasn't trying to make everyone happy, she was just trying to make herself happy and expected everyone else to bend over backwards for that. Maybe others were willing to go along with it, but not me. I have my own life, and I wasn't going to ruin it chasing after her and making sure she's okay. That stunned her, and not long after, she left. Later, I realized she had blocked me, and now I feel guilty about what I said. So here's my question. Was I wrong for calling Mum selfish and telling her she only cares about her own happiness? Update 1. Hi everyone. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented on my first post. Reading your replies really opened my eyes. You all pointed out things I hadn't even considered before. For example, it had never crossed my mind that my mum's relationship with Robert might have started before the divorce. Maybe she only admitted to it after the fact because it was easier that way. No one would suspect a thing once the divorce papers were signed. Honestly, I never even allowed myself to think my mum could cheat, but now, I'm not so sure. Either way, it doesn't matter anymore because she made it clear she doesn't want much to do with me. What really hurts is that I can't see or talk to my younger brother, and I miss him so much. We've always been close, and it breaks my heart that some of you might actually be right that Robert could be his real dad. I try not to think about it, but once the idea was planted, it's been hard to shake. I've talked to my grandma a lot over the past couple of days. Neither of us knows for sure, but it's definitely changed how we see Mum. I think talking to my dad might clear some things up, but I don't know if he'd even want to go there with me. It's been 4 days since Mum last came over, and we haven't spoken since. She blocked me the same day, and later Grandma told me she blocked her too. That's so ungrateful, especially considering Grandma takes care of me without asking Mum for child support. She doesn't need to, she has her own money. She's doing this out of love, giving up her retirement to raise me. Mum should be grateful, but instead, she cuts her off. I'm just filled with so much anger and so many questions I can't answer. I just hope that one day, the truth finally comes out. Update 2. Hi again. This one's going to be long because a lot happened tonight. My dad showed up. Apparently, Grandma had reached out to him, but she didn't tell me because she wasn't sure if he'd actually come and didn't want to give me false hope. As soon as he found out Mum was engaged to Robert, he decided to come. And when he arrived, he hugged me and said he was sorry. Honestly, that alone shocked me. Then he sat me and Grandma down and told us everything. He admitted that he and Mum had been falling out of love for a long time, but they stayed together for me. Neither of them wanted to break the family. Then, about 3 years ago, he started an affair with a co-worker. He said he wanted to confess, but never had the courage. Eventually, Mum found out about it about a year ago, and that's when she filed for divorce. Here's the kicker: Mum told him she'd keep it a secret as long as he stayed away from us. She gave him a whole list of conditions. He had to give her the house outright. She got full custody of me and my brother, though technically he still had visitation rights, but he could only see us if she allowed it. On top of that, she demanded huge child support payments and a large share of the marital property. And he agreed to all of it. The only thing he asked in return was that she never expose his affair to me, because he didn't want me to see him. As a chitter and hate him forever. So far, Mum had kept that secret, but the price was that I had no relationship with him. He also apologized for always being a workaholic, saying he never spent enough time with me or built a real bond, but he added that it wasn't only his fault. Mum always wanted more, and to keep up with the lifestyle she demanded, he had to work himself into the ground. He admitted that wasn't an excuse, but he wanted me to understand that the blame wasn't just on him. I guess I get that, but it's still a lot to process. Then he explained why he had broken his promise to her and showed up anyway. In the message my grandma left him, she had mentioned Robert and asked if Dad knew him. That's what made him rush over immediately. Not only did he know Robert, he knew exactly what kind of man Robert was, and he wanted to warn us. Turns out, my parents and Robert were all part of the same college group. Mum and Dad were already dating back then, but Robert had always been into her. Right before graduation, when they all went out drinking, Robert confessed his feelings. Mum rejected him since she was with Dad, but she only told Dad about it 2 weeks later, admitting she was confused about her feelings. That led to them taking a break for nearly 2 months. During that time, she even went on a couple of dates, including with Robert. It didn't last, and eventually she got back with Dad. When they reconciled, Dad asked her not to keep contact with Robert because it bothered him. At first, she agreed, but later that same year, he found out she had still been talking to him. It turned into a huge fight, almost breaking them up. Not long after, Robert actually showed up at Dad's place, and they ended up in a physical fight because Robert thought it would somehow impress Mum. Instead, it disgusted her, especially since she'd already made it clear she only wanted to be friends. After that, she cut him off completely. According to Dad, Robert was always unstable and a pretty awful person. After college, he left town, and no one heard from him for years. Dad suspects Mum and Robert reconnected a couple of years ago, since she once mentioned hearing he had moved back. He's not sure when they actually started seeing each other again, but the fact that they're engaged now basically proves she cheated too, which means all the divorce conditions she had forced on him technically lose their weight. Dad said he plans to confront her directly, but before doing so, he wanted me to meet with her myself and hear her side. He promised he'd wait and then act after I had my talk with her. Honestly, my head is spinning. I don't know who to believe. Neither of my parents has treated me well, and this whole situation is just one giant mess. Update 3: I finally talked to Mum. I didn't mention that I had already seen Dad. I just wanted to hear her version without her getting defensive. Since she had blocked me, the only option was to show up unannounced. Dad had come over 3 days ago, and yesterday I finally gathered the courage to face her. She looked shocked when she opened the door, but she did let me in. Luckily, Robert wasn't home, so we could talk privately. I started by apologizing, though honestly it was just to break the ice so she'd actually open up. I told her I was struggling to accept Robert so quickly after the divorce, and that's why I'd been acting the way I did. Then I got to the point. I said that the timing of everything felt way too convenient. Like it was just too neat that she suddenly met this perfect guy right after her marriage ended. That would have been the perfect chance for her to admit she had known Robert back in college. But she didn't. She just said she was lucky to run into him again. That was it. But I already knew Dad wasn't lying about them all knowing each other in college because he has photos. The only thing I still wasn't sure about were the finer details of his version of events. The moment Mum flat out lied to my face about never knowing Robert before, I realized who I should believe. But then she made it even worse for herself. She admitted she had no intention of ever telling me the truth, and the real reason she rushed into an engagement and moving in with Robert was because she wanted to erase everything connected to my dad, to wipe him completely out of her life, and then she went further. She told me about his affair, the very secret Dad had sacrificed everything to keep from me, the one she promised never to reveal. That was the breaking point. I didn't see any reason to keep talking. I just told her we'd see each other again sometime, and I left. As soon as I walked out of the house, I called my dad and told him he could do whatever he needed to do now, because I finally knew the truth. He hadn't lied to me. Mum had. So now she'd finally face the consequences. I'm not saying my dad suddenly became a saint or that all his mistakes are forgiven, but compared to my mum, he's not nearly as awful. Update for Hi again. A lot has happened since my last post. First, a question that's been eating at everyone, including me, is my brother actually my dad's son? The answer is yes. After Dad confronted Mum, they did a DNA test last month. Thankfully, it confirmed that my brother is his biological child. That gave Dad the confidence to go after full custody. Since I'm 15, I can officially declare that I want to live with Dad, and that will be taken into account legally. That being said, I'm still living with my grandma for now. Even though Dad is trying hard to make things right, there's still a lot between us we need to work through. I feel safest here with Grandma, and I'm not ready to move back in with him yet. Mum, of course, was furious when she realized my visit had been all about finding out the truth about her and Robert. She unblocked me once just to curse me out, then immediately blocked me again. We haven't spoken since .as for Robert. He dumped Mum almost as fast as he got engaged to her. Turns out, the whole time he was stringing her along, he lied about having a job offer. His actual plan was to try to worm his way into his uncle's failing business and live off my mum's money. That's also why he was pushing her to convince me to sign over the apartment Grandma had gifted me. They'd been together for 2 years, and all along he was just playing her. So now Mum's been scammed, dumped, and humiliated. Instead of admitting her mistakes, she goes around whining to her friends about Robert, not realizing they all laugh behind her back. That's actually how Dad found out the truth. Her friends spilled it, and honestly, I'm grateful. Grateful that Mum chose to push me out of her life the moment Robert told her to. It hurt at first, but now I see it was a blessing. So here we are. Dad and I have agreed to try to rebuild our relationship. He's promised to do better and be the kind of father I needed all along. And once he gets full or at least joint custody of my brother, we'll try to piece together some version of a family again. I don't know if we'll ever be a normal family, whatever that even means anymore, but maybe we can at least be a happy one. And for now, that's enough for me. I let my sister-in-law throw her baby shower at my house, but then she tried to kick me out of my own home during the party just to impress one of her wealthy friends. I told her husband what happened, and that ended up leading to their divorce. Now she's raising the baby alone. I'm 32, married for 3 years. My husband 35, and I have been together for 5 years, but he's currently working out of town, so we're basically in a long-distance situation. He comes home every other weekend. We recently bought a beautiful new house right next to my parents' place, so it's convenient for all of us. It's pretty big for just me, but I love the space. At our housewarming, everyone complimented it, especially my sister-in-law, Carrie 32. She couldn't stop gushing about it. Carrie and I aren't super close, but we've always gotten along. A couple weeks ago, she asked if she could have her baby shower at my house. I agreed without hesitation. She was pregnant. I didn't want to be rude, and honestly, I thought it might be nice to socialize a bit since I spend a lot of time alone. She said she didn't want to waste money renting a venue when I had such a perfect home for it. Her own house is fine, but smaller and not as impressive. I took her compliments at face value and agreed. For 2 weeks, she came over almost every day to plan things. I even took a day off work to help her. I work in finance, definitely not in event planning, but she kept treating me like her personal party coordinator. Still, I didn't mind because I thought this would bring us closer. I was wrong. On the day of the shower, I spent hours helping the decorator set everything up. Carrie arrived early, thanked me, acted totally normal. Then, 15 minutes before guests were supposed to arrive, she looked at me and asked, "So, where are you planning to spend the next couple of hours?" I was stunned. At first, I thought she was joking. I mean, it's my house. I was dressed for the event, had bought her a gift, and had been involved in planning everything. I asked if she was serious, and she calmly explained that I wasn't on the guest list. Apparently, she'd never intended for me to be there. She claimed she thought I was just helping out, like some kind of hired planner. She told me the shower was for close family and friends only, and that unfortunately, I didn't make the cut. She even asked me to leave before her guests arrived so I wouldn't cause a scene. I was furious, humiliated, and honestly heartbroken. I stormed outside to call my husband, but he was busy at work and couldn't pick up. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I decided to call Carrie's husband, Jim 33. I don't know him well. He's quiet and reserved. But I told him everything. How I'd let her use my house, helped plan the whole thing, and then how she tried to kick me out of my own home for her little exclusive party. He was silent for a long time after listening. I apologized for dumping all this on him, but I couldn't keep it in. I was so hurt. Jim finally said, very calmly, that I had nothing to apologize for and that under no circumstances should I be leaving my own house. It would have been ridiculous for me to leave. And Jim told me he was on his way over. He didn't want things to escalate between Carrie and me, and he didn't want her getting worked up while pregnant. That sounded reasonable, so I waited. 15 minutes later, before any of her guests arrived, Jim showed up. Carrie looked like she'd seen a ghost when he walked in. As soon as I heard the doorbell, I went back inside. We all stood in the living room, and Jim calmly but firmly told me I was absolutely welcome to stay for the shower. This was my house after all. Carrie tried to argue, but he gave her a sharp look and she went silent. She spent the whole evening glaring at me like she wanted me to vanish. I kept my cool and carried myself with dignity, but I quietly decided right then I was done with her. I even thought about cancelling the whole event out of spite, but I'd put too much time and effort into helping set it up. So I endured the evening and promised myself I'd never deal with Carrie again. After the shower ended, Jim apologized again for her behavior. Carrie didn't even look at me. He actually apologized for that too, saying she had no right to treat me that way. She was clearly bitter and thought I had forced myself into her special day, which was honestly insulting given it was happening under my own roof. Later that night, I told my husband everything. He was furious and wanted to call his sister immediately, but I asked him not to, at least not that night. I just wanted peace, but peace didn't last. The very next morning, my in-laws called me, fuming. Apparently, when Carrie and Jim got home, they had a huge blowout fight because Jim knew what she'd done to me. Now Jim had packed up and said he was done. He stopped speaking to Carrie entirely and even cut off communication with my in-laws. That shocked everyone, since Jim had always been close to her family. Their parents had even been old family friends. But suddenly, his side of the family blocked Carrie's parents everywhere: social media, phone, everything. And yet, somehow, this was all my fault. According to Carrie and my in-laws, if I had just kept quiet and gone along with her plan, none of this would have happened. They actually blamed me for ruining her marriage. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Carrie humiliated me in my own house, and I was the one being painted as the villain. I lost it. I told them straight up, I'm not taking the blame for any of this. Carrie behaved horribly. I generously allowed her to host an event at my home for free, and in return, she tried to humiliate me by kicking me out of my own house, all because she didn't think I was close enough family. Excuse me, I'm literally her brother's wife. I reminded them that if my husband had been home, Carrie never would have dared to treat me that way. And I don't regret telling Jim the truth. He was the only reasonable adult in this mess. If he decided enough was enough and chose to walk away from his marriage, I trust his judgment. That's his choice, and it's not on me. But my in-laws won't stop harassing me. They keep saying I've ruined a family and that Carrie's baby will grow up without a father because of me. Honestly, that's just emotional blackmail. I'm close to blocking them completely. But the only reason I haven't is because sometimes their words do get in my head. They make me doubt myself, even though I know deep down I didn't do anything wrong. My husband, thankfully, is fully on my side. He told me I did nothing wrong, and he'll be the one to explain to his parents that Carrie caused this, not me. He says they should be supporting her instead of attacking me. But I'm just exhausted. I don't feel guilty at all, but they won't leave me alone, and all I want is for this drama to finally be over. Honestly, I still don't even understand why it mattered so much to Carrie that I wasn't at her baby shower. It never made sense to me. So, was I really wrong for telling her husband the truth about how badly she treated me? You can make up your own minds, but personally, I think I did the right thing. I don't see any reason why I should be the scapegoat here. Yes, it's tragic if their baby ends up growing up without a father, but if they couldn't fix their marriage anyway, that outcome was inevitable sooner or later. And let's be real, Carrie had zero interest in resolving things. If she had been willing to apologize, maybe there would have been a chance to work things out. Instead, she doubled down and pushed all the blame on me. That's just insane. Update 1 high again. It's been almost a week since the baby shower, and Carrie and Jim are officially getting divorced. This isn't speculation, Jim already announced it on his socials. I didn't think things would unravel this quickly, but apparently he's already filed and the process has started. He moved back in with his parents, and they've been living apart ever since. I wasn't sure if I should even reach out because I honestly felt guilty. But after talking with my husband, we agreed that someone from the family should at least check in, especially since Jim hadn't blocked us. Clearly, he left that door open for a reason. So I sent him a message, just saying I was sorry that things had turned out this way. Not an apology for causing it, more like expressing sympathy. He actually reassured me, told me not to blame myself because their marriage had been hanging by a thread for a long time. After that, I asked him directly, why did Carrie hate the idea of me being there so much? Because they're only close relatives, excuse never added up. She'd invited plenty of people who weren't even family, people I knew she wasn't close with. So what was the real reason? Well, he told me. And wow, the truth was, Carrie had been desperate to impress one particular guest, an old school friend of hers who'd married into a very wealthy family. Carrie has been planning to start a business after the baby, and she was hoping this woman's wealthy husband might invest in it. Her entire baby shower plan was basically a performance for this one guest, and here's the kicker, she wanted to pretend my house was hers. That's why she didn't want me around. She thought she could host the event, claim the house was hers, and put on this illusion of being more successful than she really is. Obviously, she couldn't pull that off with me standing right there.as. It turned out that important friend didn't even show up because she got sick that day. But the fact remains Carrie was perfectly willing to lie, humiliate me, and use me just to keep up appearances. When Jim found out, he confronted her at home. She admitted it openly, like it was no big deal to fake an entire lifestyle just to impress someone from high school. Jim told her straight up she owed me an apology for treating me like trash after I'd been generous enough to host. She flat out refused, and that fight cracked open everything else. According to Jim, this wasn't new behavior. For the last couple of years, Carrie's been obsessed with pretending they're wealthier than they are, staging things for social media, putting on a front for acquaintances. He said it all started not long after their wedding, when some of her friends made snide comments about how modest their wedding was compared to others. Since then, she's been living in this fantasy of trying to look rich. Hearing this honestly blew my mind, but it also made everything click into place. Honestly, I think all those comments from her friends really got under Carrie's skin. But she's a grown woman, not a teenager. She shouldn't still be this obsessed with what other people think. Real friends don't mock you for not living a flashy lifestyle. If they do, maybe they're not worth keeping around. The thing is, Carrie and Jim aren't struggling at all. They live a perfectly normal, comfortable life. Sure, they're not wealthy, but they're fine. Jim works in real estate, and Carrie has a steady job at a marketing firm. She even had plans to launch her own business after the baby. If anything, she should have been saving up instead of spending recklessly. But Carrie's been fixated on projecting this glamorous image they simply can't afford. Jim said he tried countless times to explain this to her, that their life is good enough as it is, that they don't need to impress anyone. But she just brushed him off. Instead, she kept buying things without talking to him first, kept putting up a front. That put a constant strain on their marriage. He admitted he used to ignore it because he loved her so much. But with a baby on the way, he couldn't look past it anymore. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the kind of future they'd be able to give their child. After the baby shower fight, Jim finally snapped. He told me that even if I hadn't called him that day, he would have left sooner or later. The baby shower incident just sped things up. He doesn't blame me for anything, and honestly, I feel lighter knowing that. My husband and I talked it over too. He feels sorry for Carrie, of course, but he also thinks Jim wouldn't have walked away unless he'd thought it through. Jim was a good husband, and if he reached his breaking point, that says a lot. I do feel bad for Carrie, especially since she's pregnant, but at the end of the day, she dug herself into this. She's in her 30s, still acting like she's In high school, still letting shallow people dictate how she feels about her own life. She needs therapy more than she needs new designer bags. I honestly hope they figure something out, if only for their baby's sake, because growing up in a broken home is tough. For now, though, I'm stepping back. I've decided to block Carrie and my in-laws for the time being, not out of spite, but because I don't see anything good coming from staying involved. My husband agrees. We'll give them space and focus on our own lives. Update to so, my husband just got back a couple of hours ago and he filled me in. He's been in touch with Jim these past few days, and apparently Jim is open to giving their marriage another shot, but only if Carrie is willing to apologize and agree to go to therapy. My husband's been trying to get that message across to her, but so far she hasn't responded. His parents said she's avoiding everyone right now, just isolating because she's so upset, which honestly is understandable, but the ball's in her court now. As for some of the comments on my last post, a lot of people called me selfish, saying my husband and I were greedy and should have been financially supporting Carrie and Jim. I honestly don't know how people came to that conclusion, but let me clear the air. We bought this house fair and square because we could afford it. If it hadn't been within our budget, we wouldn't have bought it. And for the record, Jim and Carrie are not broke. They have stable incomes. Acting like they need our charity is just insulting to them. Also, my husband and I are in a very similar financial situation to Jim and Carrie, so I don't understand why they'd need our help or why anyone would think they do. It's a bit odd, but since some of you brought it up, I wanted to clarify. Some people didn't like that I said I hope they reconcile and stay together, claiming Jim deserves better. Maybe he does, but ultimately it's his choice. I don't get why so many people feel the need to pour hate here, call me names, or call Jim a pushover without even knowing him. They love each other despite all their problems, and they're having a child together. That's a big deal. They can't just walk away from each other and move on, given the circumstances. So yes, I wanted and still want things to work out for them. That's all I wanted to say for now. Update 3. Hi everyone. It's been almost 3 weeks since my last post. I just wanted to share that Jim and Carrie have decided to reconcile and try to work things out. I'm really happy for them, even though Carrie and I still aren't talking. I found out from my husband that they've agreed to attend family therapy for a couple of months to see how things go. They'll still live separately for now, and when the baby arrives, they'll co-parent together for the first few months. If things go well, they plan to move back in together. I'm genuinely happy for them. I know this isn't what a lot of people wanted to hear. Many were hoping Jim would just leave her, but he's going to do what he thinks is right, and everyone else will have to respect that.